For those who seek adventure, this is the Buffalo Roamer Podcast, sharing the people, places, and moments that make a life on the loose worth living.
The thing that's going to stick out to you most is when they open up that plane door. The cold is something like you've never felt.
The jungle's so thick, even if you had a machete, you couldn't get through it.
There's a huge blonde grizzly bear. And when it saw us, this thing put its head down, stomped on the ground, and hissed like an alligator.
I just crossed this brutal stretch of desert, and I was really suffering.
I'm your host, Will Collins. I'm an adventurer, outdoorsman, and roamer of wild places. I've backpacked the Brooks Range, rafted the Grand Canyon, and have canoed from source to sea, both the Mississippi and Yukon rivers. I live for adventure, travel, fresh air, and diving into the unknown. And now, I hope to share my passion with you on the Buffalo Roamer Podcast. All right, episode number 50 of Buffalo Roamer Outdoors. Here we go. Thanks for tuning in yet again. As I'm recording this intro, I am packing up for a trip up to the Yukon River. Super pumped, super excited. It is a Buffalo Roamer hosted trip. If you have any interest in joining us on a future wilderness trip, you can find out more at buffaloroamer.com. Check out some of the trips we have coming up. Today's episode, number 50, Jason Hirsh is on the podcast. Jason is a former professional baseball player. He's an outdoorsman, loves to hunt and fish and get outside, camp. So we had a great discussion about all things outdoors, mixed in with a little bit of baseball here on Buffalo Roamer Outdoors, episode number 50 with Jason Hirsh. It's been a long time, man. It's we were just chatting. I don't know how long it's been. Close to 10 years, maybe, probably shy of that. But
I was gonna say I've lived in Denver for 14 years, and my last year with the Rocks was 09. So sometime between 09 and probably 11 or so is when we first, because we were doing the stuff with Andy on the radio at nights.
Yeah. And you
were just a young fledgling college buck coming out hungry for the world.
That's right. That's exactly right. Running the sports talk, producing the sports talk show in Denver with Andy, and you were recently coming out of the league and doing a bunch of media stuff with us, talking about the Rockies. Are you still doing any Rockies stuff?
On occasion, they call me in to do things like client batting practice, which is. They get their corporate sponsors. They'll say like, "Hey, Coca-Cola, today's going to be your corporate event." They'll send like 50 of their employees down to Coors Field. They get decked out head to toe in full uniforms. They get their name up on the video board and they announce it. And then they station work with us. So like I'll obviously work in the bullpen, and we'll teach guys how to throw or what it's like to throw. And then they go to hit, and then they do some outfield, infield stuff, and then when they get done, we get to go down into the clubhouse and drink beers and eat some food and talk baseball. And so
that doesn't sound
stuff
bad.
Like that is fun. Like you get to stay connected to, to the clients or to the fan base. Obviously, my career wasn't long or prestigious in any way, shape, or form, but I was able to accomplish a lot in a very short amount of time for my career. And so it's fun for me to go back and do those things. And Coors Field, if you've never been, is obviously you've been, but for the listeners at home, is one of the most beautiful ballparks in the country. And there's nothing like being down on the field on an awesome summer day and playing a little baseball.
Oh man, I couldn't agree more, especially if you get like a night game, I forget what they were there. It was 6:10 or something.
Yep.
First pitch.
6:10 start.
Yeah.
Yep.
You get a
sun
sunset.
doesn't go down until 9:00 at night. It's like perfect temperature.
Rockies in the distance.
You get the purple mountains in the background. It's very picturesque.
Yeah, it's a great place to catch a ball game. So I want to talk about all kinds of stuff. I want to talk about, I'm interested to hear some baseball stories. I want to talk about hunting, camping, outdoors stuff, all that. But what's your, I guess two questions. One, let's start with the baseball since we're there. So you played professional baseball for the Astros and the Rockies. What was your kind of baseball career? And I know now you're running a baseball academy essentially, right?
Yep. Yeah, so I was drafted in 2003. I was a second-round pick by the Astros out of a Division III school in California called Cal Lutheran University. I came up with the Astros in 2006 to the big leagues, made my debut against the Padres. I believe it was August don't quote me on this, August 7th, I believe is what it was. My wife would know.
You quoted.
Yeah, thanks. And shortly after that season ended, I got traded to Colorado for, at that time, it was me, Taylor Buckholz, Taylor Buckholz and Willie Taveras for Jason Jennings and a guy named Miguel Asensio, who I don't think ever played in the big leagues. It was kind of a big trade at the time. I was kind of the focal point of that because I was a top prospect for the Astros. So I was on the 2007 World Series team for the Colorado Rockies. 2008, I injured my shoulder in spring training, so I missed most of that year. Came back up in September and threw a little bit. And then 2009, I had a terrible start to the year. I was in AAA, just feeling like total crap, and ended up getting traded to the Yankees, where I kind of regained my form. And right as I was getting my feet underneath me and feeling like $1 million, I blew out my shoulder. Ended up getting a full thickness tear of the rotator cuff and labrum, so I had surgery. Played some independent league baseball down in Amarillo, Texas. Played some overseas in Australia. And then I ultimately retired in 2013 and started giving pitching lessons to kids. It was not something that I really thought that I would do. I have a degree in multimedia, so I do like graphic design work and things like that. That actually, I save my company a ton of money by doing our web work and our graphic design work. And the more I thought about getting into that industry, I realized that it would probably take me just as long to catch up to the industry as it did for me to get a degree in the first place. So then I started giving pitching lessons through a friend, and I was having a lot of fun doing it. It gave me that same sense of joy and fulfillment that I used to have as a player, but now obviously as a coach. And so I, at the time, started what was then known as the cleverly named Jason Hirsh Pitching Academy, using my pseudo celebrity to drive business. And as I've grown the business over the last 9 years, we've rebranded ourselves as Fast Performance. FAST was an acronym for a throwing program that I had called Foundational Arm Strength Training. And I thought it was fairly fitting for what I like to do, which is player development stuff. I work with predominantly pitchers. We do stuff with position players and catchers and things like that too, but predominantly our 99% of our client base is pitchers. And so we moved into a new facility about 3 years ago, and with my business partners who are strength and conditioning coaches, and it's been going well. We were finally debt free earlier this year as a business, so we're super pumped and excited about that, and excited for what the future holds for us. But
that's awesome.
That's basically what I've done over the last 10, 15 years, and just tried to stay around the game and stay involved in the game, just at different levels. I did take a high school pitching coach job last year for the first time.
Okay.
I'm now at Mullen. I don't know if you're familiar with Mullen High School, but I was wearing our shirt today.
Nice.
We have our summer team. Our summer incoming freshman team was playing.
One of the Denver powerhouses.
Yeah, well, it used to be a powerhouse, and that's kind of my job. And one of the things that I'm taking under my wing is I want to revive Mullen to its once great prominence in the baseball world. And last year we were 18-5. We made the playoffs, and we had a great group of kids, super talented. I had 3 Division I arms on my starting pitching staff, and
wow,
unfortunately we lost in the playoffs. But that's the way baseball goes. You got to have a lot of luck and a lot of talent, be a good team, and unfortunately we just didn't quite make it.
And where does the hunting and the is it hunt, hike, harvest?
Hunt, hike, harvest, yeah.
Where does all that come into play? Sure.
So I'll go all the way back to the beginning, since this is long form podcasting.
Yeah,
right?
man,
We've got 2.5, 3 hours. We got 2.5, 3 hours of this, right?
Joe Rogan
like a Joe Rogan experience. So when I first came, I grew up fishing a lot with my dad. We did a lot of throwing lures and sitting on power bait and things like that. My dad grew up backpacking the Sierras, and so he fell in love with that bubble and fly. And throwing Castmasters and things like that in those high altitude lakes.
So before I even dive farther, it's funny you say that. I was actually just reading your hike, hunt, harvest site, and I saw this as well. Today I was actually Googling how to throw a fly with a spin rod, because I'm going up to the Yukon territory for hosted trip that I'm putting on, and we're doing 8 days, 7 nights, 8 days in the Yukon Territory canoeing, and there's a bunch of grayling up there, and I would typically always bring a fly rod, but with the guided trip fly rod, it's a little, I'll probably be the only one who really toss it. So I have these spinning rods. So I was just reading about the bubble and fly today.
Yeah. It's an interesting technique. It's it's a lot like fly fishing, right? But you're casting it out, and right before your bubble hits, this is at least the way I was taught. It could be the right way or the wrong way. I don't know. Right before the bubble hits the water, you snap the reel. That'll get the bubble to hit, and then it gets the leader to fly out in front with whatever fly you're throwing on there. And then you just slowly reel it in and let that top water fly do its thing and hope that you get a strike. For your trip, have you considered bringing a tenkara rod?
No, I haven't, honestly. That's not a bad idea either, though.
Yeah, I keep a tenkara rod in the back of my car at all times, just in case I ever come across water, or if I get bored and there's something nearby that I can go throw a line in. It's super compact, it's lightweight. Grayling aren't super big fish, at least the ones that I've seen around. I mean, you are going to be in Alaska, so
it'd be perfect.
And by the way, thanks for the invite. I appreciate that.
Hey, man, next time, let's do it.
Yeah.
But yeah. It should be awesome though. And actually, I do have. So I don't have the tenkara, but the rods I am bringing are all collapsible. I'm bringing 3 collapsible spinning rods and 1 collapsible casting rod for big pike. So nice. Should be awesome.
Little pocket fisherman action.
Exactly. Yep. Okay, but keep going. So the Sierras.
So yeah, I'll keep. Like I said, I grew up doing that type of fishing, learning from my dad. And then I didn't fish for a long time. My baseball kind of took precedent in my life. And, we didn't really have time for family vacations because I was playing, or I was off at college, and things just kind of got out of hand. So then, I fast forward, come to Denver, I'm playing with the Rockies, and then I get hurt. And so I'm kind of sitting around going, I need a hobby. I need something to do. And next thing you know, I'm on Groupon for whatever reason. And there's a Groupon for a fly fishing rod and a couple of classes, free classes that come along with it. So teach you how to cast, teach you how to tie knots and things like that. And I was like, you know what? This is Colorado. I just moved here. There's lots of streams. I've heard nothing but great stuff about the outdoors. I'm going to go try this out. And next thing you know, I'm hooked, both literally and figuratively. I'm hooked, and I'm beating the water, 3-4 days a week, having a blast. Catching fish and learning all about it. So then the natural progression goes, fly fishing, what's next? Well, let's go shoot a big game animal. Maybe that's the natural progression in your world, or not in your world, but only in my world. But a buddy of mine who I actually just talked to today, his name was Chris Watts. He actually runs the Western Heritage Hunt Club here in Colorado. And he was training me, strength training me at the gym I was at. And he was like, dude, we should go hunting. And I was like, I don't know anything about this. Like, I barely even have a gun. I don't know anything. But he's like, I'll take you out there and I'll teach you. And that's awesome. When you've got friends who are willing to take you out and kind of show you the ropes. Chris has hunted his entire life. I grew up in California. Hunting is not a thing in Burbank, the suburbs of Los Angeles. It's just not kind of what you do. So it was all 308, whatever. It's a standard 308.
Yeah,
I can't think of name right now. No, it's what did I get? Remington. There it is.
There you go,
Remington 700, like the most produced rifle of all time, right? Sorry, my bourbon's kicking a little bit here. So I take that. He's like, all right, let's go. We're going to go out. So we end up going to a unit. And so he's kind of showing me about, signs, like what to look for with droppings and footprints, and, how to walk around. And if we see anything, things to do, things to listen for.
And you're looking at this point for elk or deer?
Yeah, elk. Okay. No, this is all big game elk stuff. So I did it for a couple of years. I actually had a lot of fun doing it. I love being in the mountains. I'm one of those guys who could beat the water with a fly rod for 12 hours in a day, not catch a damn thing, and be super happy with myself. It's my church, my cathedral. It's where I can just go and just lose myself for a little bit and not have to worry about the stresses of the real world. And so walking around the woods, gave me a little bit of a sense of excitement, especially when you think you hear something or you think you're onto something. Your adrenaline starts kicking in, your heartbeat starts going a little bit faster. And at this point, again, I'm hunting second rifle, so there's snow on the ground. It's cold outside. I'm carrying a rifle on my shoulder. So I'm kind of just learning all this stuff. Well, fast forward a couple of years, I've done it a few times. I haven't shot anything yet. I've barely had any encounters or heard any animals outside of hunters and squirrels and martins and things like that. So my business partner, or my now business partner, always used to talk about how awesome bow hunting camp was. It's like, oh, we're going to go to elk camp. Like, it's so much fun, this, that, and the other. And so finally I got tired of listening to him talk about how awesome elk camp was. And I said, listen, if I buy a bow, can I come to camp with you guys? And he's like, oh, for sure. So I was like, bow. And first time I go out into the woods with these guys, they go to an area that they've been working for like 10, 15 years, right? They know it like the back of their hand. So we're down deep into this dark timber area, and I hear my first elk bugle, and it's like 40, 50 yards away. My chest is rattling. My bones are shaking. Like, my adrenaline is pumping. My heart's coming through my chest, and I'm like, holy shit, like, this is awesome. And at that point, I was like, all I ever want to do is carry a bow, and I want to get as close as I can to these giant animals, and I want to try and kill one. And that became my sole focus from a hunting standpoint. I actually put the rifle on the shelf and said, all right, I'm just going to work on being a really good bow hunter. And bow hunting for me, is a lot different than rifle hunting. One, I think there's more sport into it, with the idea that you have to get closer to the animals. You have to think about the type of shot that you're going to take, making sure that it's ethical and all that other fun stuff. But you added the added element of the rut and calling, whether it's cow calling or bugling. And that adds a whole nother game within the game. And, when I got done with my baseball playing career, I felt like, I've competed a lot in my life, and I didn't really want to compete in anything. I just wanted to kind of kick back and relax. And fly fishing was a place where I could compete with an animal, right? I'm throwing a piece of yarn attached to a metal hook in water and hoping something bites it.
Idiot.
It's the same thing when I hunt elk. Yeah, it's the same thing when I hunt elk or deer or anything else. It's a game, right? But my opponent, as pea-brained as they might be, scientifically, they are extremely intelligent and smart, and their self-preservation makes the hunting aspect of it a lot of fun. The gamesmanship of it is a lot of fun. So I fell in love with it. And then my partner and I decided, one day we should probably start filming some of this stuff. He's got a strength and conditioning background. Obviously, I'm a baseball player. I know how to lift weights, but I don't know why I lift weights. I just know that I should lift weights, that kind of deal. And Joel has got a background in strength and performance. He's been doing it for 30 years at a very high level. He's worked with Olympians and professional athletes. He's a performance coach for the Mammoth, which is our world champion indoor lacrosse team. So he wanted to look at it from his standpoint. He saw all these other programs that were out there, whether it was Elk Shape or Hunt Fit or whatever the other programs that are out there. He goes, you know what? We utilize all this scientific research and data when we apply it to baseball players or football players or hockey athletes or lacrosse or whatever it might be. But nobody's really taken that approach to the outdoors. A lot of it is very CrossFit-y, and there's nothing wrong with CrossFit if you do it. There's a lot of great things that come out of CrossFit, but it'll get you strong, but does it get you the right kind of strong? Are you training for the type of hunts that you endure, right? We hunt at high altitudes. We're doing a lot of climbing and descending. It's not like we're walking on paved roads, to a shooting gallery and just lining it up and pulling it. But we're working pretty hard. We hike 5 or 10 miles a day. We'll burn 5,000 or 6,000 calories. So his background, along with that, and stuff he does with special forces training, he wanted to bring that scientific approach to the outdoors. And so we started hunt, hike, harvest. And the idea behind it is that, yes, we're hunting. That's what we love to do. We do a lot of hiking. In fact, I've hiked my bow around the forest for the last 3 or 4 years without any success outside of just carrying the bow. And the ultimate goal is to harvest an animal, right? And it's, you can use the term kill or, take or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, we harvest the animal because we intend to utilize as much of that animal as we possibly can to do it the best service that we can. And so we started that, and then we just started making inroads with different companies. And we started talking with people in the industry and started finding that the outdoor industry was a lot more welcoming and outgoing than the baseball industry or the strength and condition industry. Huh. There's a lot of kind of cutthroat, backstabby, closed-minded stuff. But when we got into the hunting world, man, all you guys, and I say you guys as in, you doing what you do, and whether an outfitter or you make gear or knives or, bows or guns or whatever it might be, everybody is just so warm and outgoing. Everybody that we've ever come across has been super outgoing and open-minded to this stuff. And so we've really felt like we've been very accepted into that community. It's not like a good old boys club where it's like super exclusive. It feels like, hey, if you want to be part of the outdoors, come join us. Like, right. It's awesome. We love having you here.
And so what exactly, I know you have the podcast going with Hike, Hunt, Harvest. And so it's a strength and conditioning program focused towards hunting the mountains?
Yeah. So the way we build our programs is, let's just say it's Will Collins and you live in, you live in Alaska, and you're like, you know what? I work 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. I might have an hour to get a workout in a couple of days a week. These are the things that I have at my house, and these are my physical conditions, right? I'm, you're a pretty skinny kid. We will design a program based around, what's that?
I said I'm hefty.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Big bone. So we'll design a program based around what your needs are as an athlete, right? So you say, hey, I can only work out an hour a day. I got a trick knee. Okay, well, let's build a program that allows you to strengthen that knee. In an hour a day, we can get you physically prepared for the rigors of high altitude hunting. And I think a lot of people, at least through the outfitters that we've talked to, they always say the one biggest flaw of any person that comes to Colorado seeking out trophy elk is they take altitude for granted.
Sure.
They think it's a joke, right? You flatlanders come in, you live life at 500,000-600,000 or 500-600 feet. You come up to 10, 11, 12,000 feet, and it degrades the quality of the hunt. If you're going to spend $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 on a hunt, you better come in shape, because the quality of the hunt will be solely dependent on your ability to climb. Or to get deep into the woods or be able to carry an animal out. So
and what type of stuff are you doing specifically to try and mitigate altitude? Just general overall fitness?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a conditioning aspect to it. There's a specific exercise movement, type stuff that we're doing, whether it's doing step ups, we're using sandbags, we're using TRX bands. We're using basically anything that you have available to you, but it's preparing your body, getting your metabolic system to think about working in a different manner when you come to altitude. Like I said, Joel's versed in tactical strength and conditioning. He's one of the only TSAC practitioners in the country. So he's worked with the special forces down at Fort Carson in down south here in Colorado. And, he knows, like he'll give you the technical details about oxygen exchange and red blood cells and white blood cells and how we train our bodies to learn how to produce these things and to do it in a more efficient pattern, so that when you come to altitude, we can kind of cut that learning curve down and still allow you to hunt. You might still be winded or out of breath, but you're going to be physically in shape to endure the hunt. Whereas, if you did, let's just say you do a CrossFit type program, like I said, I'm not trying to pick on CrossFit guys, but I'm just saying is if you do that type of program, you're going to be strong. Like you're going to get strong. But is it the right kind of strength? And that's kind of where we come in, right? And that's, I look at it from a baseball perspective and I go, yeah, like I wouldn't train a baseball player like a football player because that's a different type of strength for a different type of game. So we want to be able to go to the outdoorsman. You might be overweight, you might be underweight, and go, all right, these are the types of things you should be doing. You've got a bad knee, you've got a bad back, you've got bad hips. All right, these are the types of things that we should be doing. You just want to get in better shape. All right, here's the program for you. And it's all done. We can do it remotely. So, you sitting in your basement at home, we can write you up a program. We use something called Train Heroic, where we shoot you the program and all you do is put in the weights and the number of reps that you were able to accomplish. And then every couple of weeks, Joel updates the program. He'll talk to you and say, hey, how are things going? How are you feeling? What are the limitations? Or, what do you feel like you're doing really well? What aren't you doing well? Let's get you into this phase now, or let's get you into that phase now. Maybe you're in a strength building phase, or you're in a bulking phase, or you're in a weight loss phase. And we can get you prepared. But a lot of that has to start early in the year, right? We're a month and a half out of archery season. Now is not the time to go, oh yeah, I should probably get in shape, even though certainly 6-8 weeks is going to help. But this is something we want people to start thinking about in February and March, rather than waiting until July or August to go, oh yeah, I should probably get in shape now.
So how does an archery hunt, or I guess specifically an archery hunt for you and your elk camp, break it down for me, like how it basically goes? What's your general strategy? I assume you're running from a base camp and hopping over different valleys and creek beds and stuff. But like, just give me a general rundown of how you would structure like a basic elk hunt for you.
Sure. So we've done, I've done two versions of these hunts. One's kind of a glamping hunt, if you will, and the other one's kind of a more mobile, stripped down version of it. And I actually prefer the mobile stripped down version over the glamping version. I guess I live in this fantasy where, I'm 40 years old and I'm kind of just getting into hunting. I've only been doing this for about 5 or 6 years. Joel's been hunting his entire life, so this is normal for him. But I like the idea of let's put camp on our back. Let's go set up a spike camp and go in somewhere. We haven't done that yet, but that's definitely on my bucket list of hunting things to do. So when we do our we'll call it our quote unquote glamping type hunt, we take ATVs back in. We go about 8 or 9 miles back off of a trailhead. We pack in a 16 by 20 wall tent with all of our cots and our, it ends up kind of getting glamorous, if you will. We've got our space heaters and the camp chef. And, sometimes we look at stuff and go, why did I bring this? Like, do we really need, do I really need this giant trunk full of pots and pans? Like, no, we don't. But sometimes it's nice to have some modern conveniences, even when you're 8 or 9 miles back. So we go up, we set up a base station, and then we hunt out of there. And we'll do 5 to 10 mile loops. The place that we go, we've got mapped out really well, so we kind of understand the movement patterns in that area. So we'll start out by checking, day one, we'll go down and sit.
And how many guys would be in an average elk camp for you?
We've had as many as, I think, 5 or 6, and as few as 4.
Okay.
It's not a huge camp, but again,
I wouldn't imagine.
If I showed you pictures of how much freaking gear we were able to get into an ATV trailer and on top of an ATV to make a one trip from the truck to camp, you would be astonished. Like it's unbelievable how much crap we can get in there. So like I said, we'll go out, we'll do 5-6 mile or 5-10 mile loops. We'll go check out different spots. We'll look for sign, just kind of figure out what the territory looks like. Are they calling? Are they not calling? If they are calling, what are they responding to? I think over the years, as Joel and I have gotten more into kind of the nuances of elk hunting, we've become big champions of blowing a lot of bugles and a lot of cow calls and just being really vocal and seeing who wants to talk or who's out there. I know there's different trains of thought. Like some people are like, oh, you blow too much and you call too much. And there's other people that are like, oh, you got to blow more. You got to be more aggressive. We've tried the very passive type of hunting, and it hasn't really worked super well. And we've tried the more aggressive style of hunting where we're calling a lot, and we seem to get a lot more action. Whether it's the right type of action or not.
It sounds so awesome to me as somebody who's never hunted elk or really much big game. That sounds like it just sounds so epic to just, like I'm just picturing, standing behind a tree, just wailing on that call and just like, just hoping for something. And then all of a sudden you hear something in the distance and you're like, all right, boys, we're on them.
I mean, there's nothing better than blowing a locator bugle and getting a response and going, all right, they're ready to play. And we've had that in years past where the elk have been very, very vocal. And like I said, we've tried the quiet version and we've tried the loud version, and the loud version seems to get us the better results. Being able to effectively communicate to an animal in a language that I neither understand nor really know how to communicate in is part of the excitement and the fun.
That's pretty wild, isn't it?
There's a lot of great, there's a lot of great resources out there. Jason Phelps is doing amazing stuff over at Phelps Games Calls. Dirk and the guys from Born and Raised Outdoors, and those guys have been really there's a guy named Paul Mendel he goes by the Elk Nut, and he really is an elk nut. He is a straight up nut job, but he gets results. And so I think we've kind of looked at that as part of the gamesmanship, learning how to call and call properly, learning how to communicate in a language that nobody really truly understands or knows. That's always a lot of fun. So like I said, we'll go down and we'll start blowing, and we hope to have an encounter, an opportunity. And some years the elk want to talk and they want to play, and there's other years where they play hard to get. There's other years like last year where they don't say a word. They were entirely quiet for the month of September. So that's the glamping version of it. The more stripped down version is when Joel and I go out into the woods, just the two of us. We have a smaller tent. We take a Cabela's, a Lacnac. It's a 10 by 10. Not like a super portable tent, but a lot more portable than a 16 by 20 wall tent. And we set up, we do pretty basic stuff. We'll eat peak refuel or mountain house meals. We bring, very limited, water and other accessories, just so that in case we need to pick up and move, we can do so fairly quickly. And we did that last year. The original place that we set up, we went in. We didn't like the way it looked. It was hot. Nobody was really talking. And so we said, screw this. We're going to pack up camp and we're going to move, 10, 15 miles in a different direction. We're going to go over to a different drainage, or we're going to kind of come at this from a different way, set up camp and then go in. And last year when we moved the second time around, we had an encounter. We came out into this clearing, a bunch of tall scrub oaky stuff. We were just kind of exploring the area. Next thing you know, there's, 8 or 10 elk running across this ridge line in front of us. And one of them kind of pulls out of the aspens and starts kicking around like a dog on zoomies. And we were like, oh crap, like he looks like he might want to play. So Joel blows a cow call and he whips his head around and looks straight down at us. And he goes, I kind of liked what that sounded like. And we blew a few more and he was like, nah, I'm good. And he went back to kind of thrashing around, digging his antlers into the ground and kicking his back feet up. So Joel backs up a little bit and blows an estrus call, which is more of like a mating type sound. And he whipped his head around. He goes, yep, that's what I wanted to hear. And he made a straight beeline for us. I mean, he probably closed 200 yards in 10 seconds.
Jeez.
Like, he was on a mission for that cow sound. So my heart starts pumping a mile a minute. I knock an arrow. I'm like, if this elk walks down the path that he's going, he's going to pop out 10 yards in front of me and I'm going to stick him. And so Joel starts working his way back a little further. He keeps calling, and I peek my head around this scrub oak, and I can see his antlers staring straight at me. And I'm like, oh shit, like this is really going to happen. And so I'm sitting there shaking like a leaf on a tree. I'm like, all right, let's go. Like I'm just waiting for the hoofs to start cracking some leaves. And next thing you know, I don't hear anything. And then I look back at Joel, and he points up on the hill, and all I see is a white ass running back up the mountain. He had winded us. We had gotten a gust of wind that came up behind us. Again, we had just kind of popped into this place by chance, and the wind got the best of us. So it was a great encounter, and we love having stuff like that. We got a bunch of video of it. But unfortunately, we didn't harvest an animal, and we didn't hear anything the rest of the trip out there. But again, I'm always having fun, and I purely, truly enjoy the game within the game within the game. Like all of that stuff is just so much fun for me.
Before we broke off, you were talking about your elk encounter, bugling, coming right in, and I've said it before, but it's one of my favorite things. I haven't done really any big game hunting, but I have done waterfowl, a lot of duck and goose hunting and pheasant hunting when I was in South Dakota, and then just all the fishing I've done as well. But the hunting thing is, it's such a different perspective of wildlife and of wild places than hiking or biking or backpacking or canoeing, which is what I love to do, because it's like any of those things are awesome and beautiful and great, but you're rolling through this piece of wilderness, and everything within a 15-mile radius, every piece of wildlife knows that there's a big bad human around, and so they run, they hide, they whatever it might be. But when you're just sitting still and not trying to be seen, the whole all the mountains and the whole woods come to life around you, and it's just such a different perspective that I think is so unique and so awesome compared to how most people experience the outdoors.
Yeah, 100%. It's you sit somewhere long enough. We did that this year. So going back to the story before we got cut off, we went back to that place and we sat there for many hours over the next couple of days. And you're right. Like when you walk through, for whatever reason, the animals know that it's you, right? It's not another animal, right? Elk are not small and they're not quiet. And they stomp around the woods, and for whatever reason, they don't spook each other. They don't, or at least we don't get to see them spook each other. Bears do the same thing. Moose do the same thing. So we're sitting there, and we're set up in the right spot this time. And I keep hearing this rustle of leaves kind of off in the distance. And I look over at Joel, and I go, that sounds like something's walking. And he looks at me, he goes, nah, it's like a squirrel or something like that. Man, I keep hearing it sounds like something's walking. And sure as shit, 10 minutes goes by, and there's a cow moose staring straight at us. But she came in so quiet, like literally like a squirrel, and just kind of stared at us for a second. It was like, huh, you guys are good, huh? All right, well, I'm just going to go over this way. I know you can't shoot me, so I'm just going to go over this way. It's like they have this sixth sense about them that they know you're not there for them, right? The elk know that you're there for them, and so they get really skittish. Deer think that you're there for them, so they get really skittish. But every other animal in the woods, they don't give two rips. They know, whether you're a bear or a squirrel or a pine marten or whatever other animal is out there, they have no problem making as much noise as they want to make. And so you're right. It is cool to be sitting, in the woods and just listen to the woods talk back. Yeah. And just feel like, I like the idea or the concept that I'm the first human being to ever step foot on this piece of earth. How many people have walked this stretch of land? Am I the first person to ever step foot on this patch of dirt or touch this tree or cross this river in this spot? Like that brings me, like, that gives me that sense of like the great outdoors. Like, it's so big and so massive. There's no possible way that another human over the millions of years of our existence has ever stepped foot on this exact piece of land.
You might be surprised, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, then I take 2 steps and I find a beer can, and I'm like, oh, shit, I guess I'm not the first one to think about this.
I know exactly what you mean, though. I know exactly what you mean. How about any other interesting or, memorable wildlife encounters while you've been out looking for elk, or even shed hunting, or just scouting or anything like that? You seen anything cool in the mountains out there?
It's one of those things that, going back to that conversation, it's like, we've been out shed hunting before. We kind of found a stretch of road that is a dirt road, and we're like, oh, it looks like we could probably pop up here. And again, we're just kind of walking back through some areas, and again, it's that thought of, I don't think anybody's ever been back in here before. And then you come across an old campsite, where there's some old tin cans, or there's literally like the old beer cans that you had to open with a can opener type thing sitting on the ground. You're like, oh, I wonder how long this has been here. Clearly, humans have been into this area. I mean, we've come across bear and moose, and we've had several encounters with them. Nothing where that would be considered deadly or dangerous. I mean, I guess a couple of years ago we had one of our members at our elk camp had shot a bull, and we had harvested all the meat off of it and left the carcass. And a couple of days later, we were a couple hundred yards below it. It was kind of on a hillside, so we decided to hunt down lower. And we were working our way back up towards where that carcass was, and we encountered a very, very hot, steamy, fresh pile of bear poop. And we're like, well, I guess there's a bear somewhere nearby. And one of the guys in our party spotted it, and it was Mama and 2 cubs. And as you well know, you don't want to mess with Mama and cubs. And I think
food.
I don't know. Oh yeah. And I
Bad
don't know
combo.
if she caught wind of us, but she escorted us out of that territory at a distance. And that was probably, I think I was the only one carrying a sidearm on that trip. Everybody else decided to leave theirs in camp that day for whatever reason.
Go figure.
Nobody had bear spray. And I'm like, you guys better pick up the biggest rocks and sticks you can find and start chucking them if she comes any closer. And she escorted us out. I never actually got to see her, but you could definitely hear her above us. And she could have been 50 or 60 yards ahead of us or above us on the mountainside. But she made sure that we walked our scared lily white butts out of there. And that was probably the closest encounter we've had. But, we duck hunt, we pheasant hunt, we goose hunt. All of those are just tremendous experiences, whether it's public land or private land. We've had some great opportunities to go out and do a lot of that stuff as well. And I think just for me, like I said, I just truly enjoy the experience of being in the woods. Hunting is almost secondary to just being out there and just kind of putting the worries of the world, human world, on hold for a week or two.
Yeah.
Just to go out and kind of get back to your roots as a primitive human being and enjoy just being outdoors and not having to worry about showering and paying bills and just going out there and hanging out with your buddies and having a good time. And I think that's really what's attracted me to the hunting world, and obviously having people that are friends that you want to spend time with out in the woods helps.
Oh yeah,
a lot. It's not just me by myself, although I've done that. One of my very first rifle hunting experiences, they sent me solo out into the wilderness, and I remember breaking off with the 2 other guys I was with, and I couldn't help but think to myself, like, I'm by myself. I have no way of communicating with anybody. I'm going to a place I've never been before in the mix of all these potential wild animals. and I'm supposed to like know what to do. There's nothing that can really prepare you for that. You just have to go out there and do it. I'm sure you've
Totally.
been, when you took your first solo canoeing trip, down a river or across a vast stretch of land, whatever it might be, it's that sense of like being alone.
Yep.
And being by yourself. Human beings are very gregarious people or animals, and you just want to have that comfort and safety of another person there.
Absolutely.
But when you're by yourself, there's a different mind game that you play with yourself over what was that noise, or am I going the right way, or what happens if.
Yep.
All of that stuff starts to just run wild.
I love it. Yeah, I specifically remember the first overnight solo camping trip I did. It was in northern Wisconsin, and I was canoeing, and it was just, it was one of those things where it's like, it doesn't sound like a big deal. It's like, yeah, I've done this a million times with friends or whatever. But the first time I went out, I paddled upriver a little bit. It wasn't even far, it was basically in the backyard, and saw a big two whitetail crossing the river in frone of me. And you're right, it's that I'll never forget it. Yeah, because it is that feeling of like, oh, hey, there's no one to impress here. There's no one, there's
no one's coming if I call for help.
Yeah, exactly. It's just me. Like you take things a little more cautiously.
You have to find a way to survive, and you just hope that, everything that you brought with you is enough, or that you have enough common sense to figure out how to get back to where you came from. That's
the key. Yeah. You have to have your wits about you, which is awesome. How about,
because then I'm like, well, I'm going to be like Gilligan's Island. I'm going to set a signal fire, and I'm going to spell out SOS with rocks on this hillside, or you know what I mean? Like, all of that starts to come into play. That popular culture stuff.
Yep.
Some of that is actually, tangible information, right? People make fun of Bear Grylls all the time for all the wacky, crazy stuff he does, but a lot of that stuff could potentially save your life in a situation that it becomes necessary.
You drinking your pee back there, Jason? You're at your house.
I am
you're
not.
Fine.
No, this is bourbon. This is bourbon. But those are like, when I got into this, obviously I packed way too much gear.
Oh yeah.
And because I wanted to be as prepared as I thought I needed to be. And then over the years of doing this, I've realized that, well, I don't need this and I don't need that. Like, that's a creature comfort. I don't need to pack, 2 gallons of water with me. Like, I take a water filter, whether soy or a Life Straw or something like that. So if I find some water, I can fill it up and filter it. Like, you start to figure out what really are the necessities of life.
Yep.
And you pack just the basics. And, I'm not 100% there, but I feel like I'm pretty close to figuring out what I need. Now, that being said, I've never done like a solo, or I've never done a backpacking trip where I've literally carried camp on my back. The unfortunate
Let's go, man. Let's do it.
I'm all about it. Like, I totally want to do it. The scary part for me is I'm not a small human being, right? I'm 6'8" and 240 pounds of lean, mean, fighting dad bod machine. So, finding a tent and a sleeping bag that are light enough, but that I can, that are functional, that'll fit me, is not the easiest thing in the world. And I don't exactly have a multi-million-dollar budget to go spend on the latest and greatest in specialty gear. So, thinking about like getting the right type of bag. It's like, I sleep in a Cabela's outfitter bag, and it probably weighs 10 pounds, but I don't need to pack it on my back. You know what I mean? It's not. I'm bringing it in because I know I'm going to have an ATV or a car to drag it in with.
Yep.
If I'm going to go backpacking, I need to get a little bag that's going to weigh 3 or 4 pounds.
Yeah. But
that's also going to cost me $600 or $700 to get.
Yeah.
So,
but
as the gear gets more specialized, it also gets more expensive.
It's true, and you're right, especially with backpacking. Backpacking is a little more specific only because, you want to be as light as you can. But to your point that you were saying earlier, I have found to be true, and I think you have too, and almost everybody that I talk to on the podcast. It's like when you don't know at the beginning, it's like you have so much shit, so much random stuff that is useless. And the more that you know, the more I realize, at least, you don't really need that much. It's like, you need the basics, and then the rest of the stuff, like, you can figure out and kind of get by without. You really don't need that much. You don't need the latest and greatest gizmo and gadget. It's like you need a tent, a tarp, I
need water and food.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And if I'm hunting, a weapon.
Yep.
And that's like the bare necessities, right? And it's just learning, right? You backpack and you're counting ounces. You're not counting pounds.
Yep.
So,
how about cutting you off? But question for you: in talking about your, and guys out in Colorado, I know Mark Johnson, who is a buddy over at KOA. There'd always been talk that there's no grizzlies in Colorado, right? But he had told me that he's sworn he's seen grizz, I believe up by his place, which is not far from Denver.
He lives in Evergreen.
Yeah. I don't know if it was at his place, but I've heard of stories, and I've heard that Colorado DNR supposedly tries to poo-poo it, but they say that there's stuff there. Curious on your take and the scuttlebutt in your area.
So it's funny you say that. So one of the other podcasts that I like to listen to fairly regularly is the Meat Eater podcast. I like Steve Rinella, and they tell some great stories, and it's always a good laugh and a good time. He was telling a story, and you will call it a myth because I don't think it's ever been confirmed, that there is a group or a small, they're not a herd, or there's a small gathering of grizzly bears in southern Colorado. I don't know, as far as I know, it's never been officially confirmed, but there is rumors that there are grizzly bears in southern Colorado. What Mark Johnson may have seen is, we have black bears are prevalent all over the state. Some of them can be cinnamon in color, and without the discernible hump in their backs, you don't really, like if I see a cinnamon bear, because I've seen them in Cheeseman Canyon when I've been fishing down in there, I've seen brown colored bears.
Sure.
But I don't look at them and go, oh, that's a grizzly bear.
Right.
Like I look at that and go, it's the cinnamon bear. Like it's a brown bear, but it's a part of the black bear family. It's not an actual grizzly bear. So I've never encountered one. In fact, was it 2 years ago? We're in the unit that we normally go for archery, and a little brown bear ran right in front of Joel. We're like 20 yards in front of where he was sitting. I thought it was an elk, and I was like, well, that's a little ass elk if that's an elk, and it was hauling ass going across the little meadow we were sitting in. And by the time I realized what it was, I had pulled out my gun and I was holding my bear spray. I'm going, all right, if this thing makes one wrong move,
it's a bad day.
It's going to get one of these two things or both. And it was a brown colored bear, but I don't, when I see bears in the wilderness, especially where we hunt,
you think black.
I don't think grizzly bear. I think black bear or brown or like cinnamon type.
Well, the word has always been that there's none in Colorado, and officially still
Allegedly.
That's the word. But yeah, exactly. It's kind of one of those
quotations
things.
On that.
How about?
But that was like, they said that there weren't wolves in Colorado either.
Right.
And we did the ballot box biology a couple of years ago, and now we're going to have to introduce these wolves. But the CPW finally decided, you know what, we'll acknowledge that bears have come down out of Wyoming and into northern Colorado, and they finally acknowledged they had trail cam pictures. They had actual physical confirmation that there was wolves in northern Colorado. And you're like, well, we don't want wolves in Colorado, or we don't have wolves. I'm like, wolves don't know state lines.
No.
They don't know boundaries. They just know food and survival. And so it's not unrealistic to think that wolves could travel from Wyoming and come south in search of new territory. It's not unrealistic at all. And I would even say it's a natural progression, right? And I would totally be okay with that. But artificially introducing them into the state where they haven't been prevalent for however many decades or hundreds of years, it doesn't make a lick of sense to me. That's why.
And so, just to be clear, so a couple years ago, Colorado had like as you mentioned, a vote to repopulate.
They put it on the ballot to reintroduce wolves to the state, and it passed by the slimmest of margins. And if you look at all the people that voted for it or voted in favor of it, almost exclusively the people that voted in favor for it are all from major metropolitans, right? Denver, Boulder, the places where people live. The people that voted against it were the people that live where they raise cattle and they have farms and, ranches and things of that nature. And those people were like, no, we don't want those things. Now, like I said, if they naturally come down, it's one thing, but to artificially introduce it is completely different. And that's where it ruffled a lot of feathers, is that, CPW was adamantly opposed to it. Their scientists and their professionals said, we should not do this.
And what's the what are the pros and cons? I mean, I guess I kind of understand the pros, as in save the wolves, repopulate.
Right.
What are the cons?
So the cons that a lot of people throw around is that you're going to see more skittish big game populations. You're also going to see a reduction in those game populations because
only makes sense.
I like to try and use the analogy of, if I put 10 elk in a 1 acre pen with a human, and I put 10 elk in a 1 acre pen with a wolf, right? The human will kill those elk as he needs them. The wolf will kill all 10 of them because he's hungry or fun or whatever, because that's what wolves do, is they kill. And so they kill indiscriminately. They don't understand conservation, right? Whereas humans understand the conservation side of things. So it gets very political and touchy when you start talking about this subject with people. But I look at it from a hunting standpoint, and there's plenty of examples in Idaho and Montana where wolves were artificially introduced into a population, and the politics of it is what really ruins the whole thing, right? It says, this happened in Idaho, and we've talked to a lot of people from Idaho, and they're like, this is exactly what happened. The idea was that they're going to introduce a certain number of breeding pairs, right? Let's just call it, it's 10 or 50 or whatever the number is. Once that number reaches, and once the DNR, or CPW in our case, says, all right, we have 100 breeding pairs of these animals, we are now going to start a conservation method on these things. So we're going to issue a certain number of tags for the ability to take a wolf. Well, what happens is that these pro-wolf groups or these environmental groups is they then go, wait a second, we want to litigate this. And they drag out that litigation for years and years and years. And so now when we wanted to manage wolves at 100 breeding pairs, now we have 1,000 breeding pairs, and they're still litigating these things. So nobody's been able to manage this population while it's grown gangbusters in the wild, and it's destroying, our wild game populations. But it's being drugged through the mud in the courts and through the political process. And so that's my fear here in Colorado, is the exact game book that was done in Idaho and Montana is going to be done here, where they go, all right, we want to start managing at X number of breeding pairs. And then those environmental groups come in here and go, no, we want to litigate this now. We think it should be more, or it should be, we should wait a little bit longer to do this, that, or the other. And then it gets out of hand.
Yeah. From my perspective, that all makes sense. From my perspective, it seems like it doesn't seem to make sense, like you said, to do biology by the ballot box. It's like you have the DNR or the game, the Colorado what is it?
Right.
Wildlife and Parks out there?
CPW, it's Colorado Parks and Wildlife.
Yeah, Parks and Wildlife.
That's a whole nother conversation.
But you have these biologists, and their whole job is to maintain healthy populations, maintain recreation, maintain essentially, populations. But then you backdoor them by just doing these popular things, where, as you mentioned, people in the city or whoever, average Joes, most people don't understand the conservation balance. And there's also a lot of hard and true facts about biology that don't seem to make sense on face value. For instance, like I know black bears eating their cubs. It's like, if you take a big black bear out, you'll actually have more cubs often. It's like nature doesn't necessarily work on
nature doesn't work on logic sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Our face value.
If you've ever followed the Nature is Metal Instagram page, you'll see that logic does not apply. It's funny because my mom is very adamantly an anti. She's an animal lover. I grew up in a house full of animals, so the idea that I hunt animals is, one, it's not lost on her, but two, she doesn't like the idea that I'm going to go out and kill a poor animal.
Sure.
And I try to explain it to her the way that it was explained to me when I first started hunting, is that CPW looks at certain areas of the state. We call them game management units here. And they go, all right, this swath of land, let's call it, it's 100,000 acres, or it's 50 square miles, whatever it might be. This piece of land can only sustain 1,000 head of elk, right? But there's currently 1,500 elk that live in this swath, right? And so what they do is they say, all right, in order for us to maintain this herd, the health of this herd, so that these animals can grow big and strong and stay healthy, free of communicable diseases and starvation and other things, we have to effectively thin this herd out. So we're going to issue 500 tags for this unit in hopes that our hunters are going to kill 500 animals and sustain this population. And we know that, if you're taking 500 elk in a unit, that's a damn good unit. It's probably highly sought after. And then the state is going to generate revenue through the sale of those tags to support other projects, whether it's further conservation, which, hunters in general are the biggest conservationists in the world. People always talk about the environmentalists and they're trying to save the trees and save the planet. Hunters generate more revenue worldwide for the conservation of animals on the planet than any other group in existence. And we do it paying through our hunting fees and for our licenses and things like that. So when I explain it to her like that, it makes sense, but she still can't get around the fact that I'm killing that poor little animal.
I know.
And when I tell her, I'm like, listen, I'm not killing this animal for fun. It's not like I put a bullet in its head and I walk away and I consider that a successful hunt. Like hunt, hike, harvest. The last word of that is harvest. That means that I am trying to feed my family with this animal, right? I'm going to try and do it as much justice as I possibly can by ethically harvesting it, meaning I'm going to do my best not to make this animal suffer. And then two, I'm going to try and take as much of this animal home with me to feed my family so that I don't have to go to the supermarket and buy whatever meat is sitting in the cooler there. When she's very happy going, well, I'm just going to go buy a steak or a piece of chicken. I'm
right.
like, well, that steak and that chicken was raised on a farm in a cage. Who knows how it was raised. I know that my elk was grazing in the woods on grass and leaves and plants and berries and whatever it might be, and it lived a great life. And if I did it justice, I killed it swiftly and ethically, and now I'm bringing it home to feed my family.
It's great, man. I love it. I'm right there with you, and I think it makes sense. And it's I don't know. I guess some folks just can't make the leap. I understand it.
I have a dog, right? I could never in a million years go out and hunt a dog, right? Because my dog is my best friend. He's a member of my family. And I think some people that are animal lovers, they just can't, every animal to them is somebody's friend. It's a living creature. Like I totally understand that. I get it. But human beings have been sustaining themselves on wild game for millions of years. This is not a new concept. It has been around for the entirety of mankind. We have just come to a place in our society where food just shows up at a supermarket, and we don't question where it came from. We just buy it and eat it. The minute that you show somebody where it comes from, all of a sudden they go, oh, wait a second. You mean that? And that's where I'm like, yes, I'm going to the grocery store, but I don't take a shopping cart. I take a bow.
Yeah. And it's something too. I think it also has to do a lot with just being in the woods and being in nature as opposed to being in the city or being in, quote unquote front country life or something where, you do have more encounters with the reality of nature and wildlife rather than just pets and a bird or something.
Well, I mean, you're a fisherman, right? We've all caught fish. My mom catches fish, and she has no problem eating fish. I'm like, what's the difference? That fish had a family. That fish had friends. Like that fish is just as wild as the elk that I'm going to shoot, right? But because it's bigger, or it has 4 legs, or it's got fur, whatever it might be, it's still another animal that I'm trying to harvest for the sustainability of my family. And so it's not any different in that regard, but because it's bigger or it resembles something that they're used to seeing, they all of a sudden their mind switches and goes, I don't want you to kill that thing.
Yeah, it's I totally understand it. I don't I try and look past it. Or I do look past it. Not past it, but onto the second level, the second.
Well, I mean, there's a thing too. Like I shot a deer this year with a rifle, and we can get into that story. We put out a great YouTube video about it called Ghost Bucks. It really, for me, I think when people think of hunting or they watch a hunting show, all they ever see is success, right? Every time you watch a meat eater, well, not every time. I guess Meat Eater is one of those shows where they don't always show success. But you watch a lot of other hunting shows, and it's always we're shooting this giant buck or this giant elk, or we're killing this giant bear or moose or whatever it might be. We had a great stalk on a deer this year, and I've always heard that idea of like what do they call it, where you freeze when you get a buck fever, right? Buck fever. And so we put a great stalk on a muley this year, and I got behind the rifle, and in the back of my head, I was like, wow, I'm really actually going to do this right now. Like I'm actually going to put the crosshairs where I want to put them, and I'm going to pull the trigger, and something's going to happen. And I guess I don't know if it was natural instinct or my want to like actually harvest and put my hands on this animal kicked in. I pulled the trigger, and I thought I made a great shot on this animal. And I've showed the video to dozens of my friends, and they all look at it and go, that's a dead deer. And the reality of it was I never found the deer. I spent 2 days looking for it. I covered, tens of square miles, scouring the landscape, looking for this animal to try and, do it justice. And at the end of the day, I came up empty-handed. And at the end of our video, Joel and I sit down and we have a conversation that as much good intention as you have sometimes when you go out and try and do this the right way, it doesn't always work out in your favor. And sometimes, crazy things happen with bullets or arrows. You just barely miss it by an inch or two, or it passes through the no man land, whatever it might be. And the animal runs off and it might be maimed or injured. And then you can't find it because their natural instinct is to survive. And you don't find it. You just get that sinking like pit in your stomach where you realize that you just injured something and you may never be able to find it again. Like you permanently injured this animal unintentionally, and you've altered the course of their life when all you were trying to do was feed your family with it. And that is a really, really hard pill to swallow, and it's a hard lesson to learn, that not every hunt, not every shot, not every way that you try and harvest that animal is always going to be a success.
Yeah.
And that, I think, as a hunter, that's something you have to be able to live with and move past and realize that these things happen.
Yeah.
For whatever reason,
I mean, yeah,
God didn't want you to take it that day.
Yeah, it's the same way in the natural world as well. The mountain lion is gonna, or the wolf. We're talking about wolves. 9 times out of 10, that wolf is gonna get that moose calf and have its day. But there's gonna be the moose calf who gets away, with a broken leg or whatever it might be.
Right. And now it's permanently maimed for the rest of its life, and it may never grow up to fulfill its destiny as a
probably won't
as a bull moose or whatever it's destined to do.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's an important lesson for a lot of hunters, especially new hunters. And I don't really wish that upon anybody. I wish everybody a successful, clean harvest. And unfortunately, it happened to me. And I know from talking to friends that have done this a lot longer than I have, that it's just a part of hunting. It happens, and you have to be able to live with that and move on. And I go back and watch that video and go, man, I thought I did everything right. Like I put the sight where I wanted to. The rifle was exactly where it should have been. It was sighted in perfectly. Like everything could be perfect, and just something can happen that can cause you to lose that animal and never find it again.
If somebody wants to see that video or get in contact with you or check out your hike, harvest, hunt, or what is it? Hunt,
hike, harvest.
Hunt, hike, harvest.
A lot of verbs there.
Training program. What's the best way to do all that stuff?
So we have a YouTube channel. That's where all of our video content goes. We try and do stuff fairly regularly. We just got back from Total Archery Challenge, which is a great event. They run them nationwide. We're about ready to, Joel's actually working on putting all the footage from that together up on YouTube. So it's, I believe it's youtube.com, and you can just type in Hunt, Hike, Harvest, and you'll find our channel there. You can go to hunthikeharvest.com. You'll see our website. It's got links to all of our YouTube videos on there as well. And then our Instagram page is also at Hunt, Hike, Harvest. We're trying to put out a lot of content. Right now, we're kind of reworking some of the strength and conditioning stuff. We've partnered. We partnered with an apparel company called Numa Outdoors. They're out of Texas. It's awesome equipment. There's a code on the website for 20% off your first order. I love Numa because I'm a tall guy, right? And in the hunting industry, a tall pair of pants from some of the other companies, it would be like a 34-inch inseam.
Right.
And that's a standard inseam for most other companies. So Numa is a company that makes 36-inch inseam pants, which are perfect for me. I've got a tall frame, and they've been awesome with us. And so we've partnered with them. And then we're doing some stuff with a couple of new companies. There's an event, a rucking event, that we're going to be gathering some biometric data from to kind of help us better fine-tune some of our programming for athletes and give them a better idea of kind of what's going to take for them to get in the right kind of shape for the type of hunt that they're going to be enduring. So we post a lot of that content on our Instagram page. So primarily, if you wanted to get in contact with us, Instagram and YouTube are the best ways to do it. And then you can always shoot us an email. It's hunthikeharvest@gmail.com. Joel Rather and Jason Hirsh were the co-founders of it. And we're just trying to find our little niche within the outdoor industry and have some fun with it, meet great people and network and go out and have great hunts and really enjoy the outdoors.
Awesome, man. That's what it's all about. Hey, I appreciate your time. It's been fun chatting and reconnecting. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, sometimes I get a little mouthy on these things, but
no, it's great. That's what it's all about.
I like telling stories and bullshitting with guys, and I think that's part of the great community of outdoorsmen. You know, when you walk into a Bass Pro, it says "Welcome hunters, fishers, and other liars." I think that's, you know, for me, sitting around a campfire and just shooting the shit and drinking whiskey and having a good time with your friends and having that community is what it's all about.
Absolutely.
We also have a podcast. You can find it on all the other podcast platforms. Just look up Hunt, Hike, Harvest. I think it's called Campfire Chronicles is our podcast title. So we've got some great stuff with people in the outdoor industry from all different walks of life. We've talked to, you know, guys from the Colorado Bowhunters Association. Henry's been an awesome dude with us, all the way to Jason Phelps from Phelps Game Calls. He's come on with us. And then my buddy Alex Hars, who summited Mount Everest and has a great documentary out there. We did a 3-part podcast with him,
Nice.
which is absolutely fascinating. And he's got a documentary on Amazon that you can watch called the Quest Nepal and the Quest Everest. If you like that outdoorsy stuff and that solo adventure type stuff, it is fascinating. Like his story from where it started being, you know, growing up as a flatlander in Nebraska to climbing the highest peak in the world is unreal. And I'm so thankful for him to be able to sit down and talk with us and share his story. And we just like having that community. And this is, you know, your podcast here is the same way. It's very much just talking with people, reconnecting. Obviously we haven't chatted in years, and to see what you're doing with, you know, Buffalo Roamer and all the stuff that you've been able to accomplish since your radio days. It's awesome to see it. And I love hearing more about it. And hopefully one day we can get together and we can go on an excursion together, and maybe we can show you some bow hunting stuff and you can show me some canoeing stuff, and we'll have a lot of fun with it.
It'd be great, man. And also I've been wanting to connect those two. I want to try and take the canoe out and bow hunt, or probably slug hunt out here in Illinois. You know, like, because there's so much area that is overlooked because it's canoe access. Like, there's so many of those islands on these rivers. Colorado, you don't have as much water, but out here we got some rivers that, you know, all the islands are public on, and I know deer go out and hang out on those islands, and I'm sure the pressure's just nothing. So that's something that I want to do. Yeah.
It's crazy because when you say you're from Illinois, like, everybody's mindset goes straight to Chicago, right? You think these major metropolitans, you don't realize that Illinois is a huge state.
I know it.
And it's not just defined by one city or one metropolitan area, but there's actually, you know, quite a bit. There's kind of get a little bit off track here. There's a YouTube series from the Meat Eater guys, and they talk about this area in New Jersey that is like a massively overlooked hunting area where you can hunt deer and you can fish and you can do all this stuff. But you think New Jersey, you think it's a major, you know, metropolitan type area, but you don't realize that the state itself, there's so much untouched wilderness out there, so many wild animals, and every state has conservation policies and parks and wildlife that, you know, that has game that needs to be managed. And there's tons of opportunities out there to do all of those things. You just have to know where to look.
There really is. And I'll leave you on this, but that's one of the things that I love about the Midwest, especially coming back after spending, you know, 10, 15 years out west in different places. It's like the wilderness is so overlooked here. It's like, it's not, and the other thing I like about it is, you know, if you're in Boulder, not to downplay Boulder because I love it, but, you know, you go hike the Flatirons, it's like you're walking past, you know, a guy who's going to do the Leadville 100 next week, and then you got like, you know, you're at Mount Everest, buddy, and it's like, there's a lot of that, whereas out here, it's like, there's nobody, you know, you go take the canoe out on a river and you have it all to yourself. Maybe there's some guy drinking beer, catfishing on the side or something, but there's so much wilderness and rivers that are overlooked. It's great.
Yeah, and that, you know, that means that it's got low pressure, which means there's great opportunity there. Yeah. You know, if people haven't figured out what's there or taken advantage of it yet, and you have, by all means take advantage of it, because it could be some of the best hunting and fishing you've ever experienced in your life.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Well, hey, Jason, thanks again. Good to reconnect. And yeah, take it easy. Good luck this fall.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
And there you have it. Episode number 50 of Buffalo Roamer Outdoors with Jason Hirsh is in the books. Thanks for tuning in. Please make sure you're subscribed to the show if you enjoy the podcast. Also, think about joining us on a future trip, or just read some journal entries and browse some cool adventures at buffaloroamer.com. Take it easy, get outside, get some fresh air.